Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I live in Asia and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later, and I didn't bother answering. But through my window, I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already, I wasn't digging the neighborhood. But I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house. So my gate was blocked more often than never. But no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week I was having a shower in my bathroom, and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-story house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof since the public supplies pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden, only cost like $5 per month, even with a neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there is a bull valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services is grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he is moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe, and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face? He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh, okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the butt by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds, 1 stone, I'd say. I've been a nurse at County General Hospital for about 7 years now. Started right after getting my Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and while the job has its ups and downs, I genuinely love what I do. Emergency room duty can be quite intense, but there's something uniquely satisfying about being there for people during their most critical moments. That Tuesday evening started like any other shift. I had just clocked in at 6 p.m. ready for my usual 12-hour stint in the emergency room. The first few hours were relatively standard. A couple of broken bones, someone with severe food poisoning, and an elderly patient with chest pain that turned out to be acid reflux. Nothing we couldn't handle. Around 9:30 p.m. everything changed. We got word of a major pileup on the highway about 2 miles from our hospital. Initial reports suggested at least 8 vehicles were involved, with multiple severe injuries. Our emergency room immediately went into high alert. We cleared as many beds as we could, called in additional staff, and prepared for incoming trauma cases. The first ambulance arrived within minutes, carrying a teenage girl with internal bleeding and a severe head injury. Right behind it came 2 more ambulances, one with a man who had nearly lost his arm, and another with an elderly couple, both in critical condition. The emergency room transformed into organized chaos. Doctors shouting orders, nurses running between patients, the constant beeping of monitors, and the metallic clang of medical instruments. That's when she walked in. Karen, that's what we all ended up calling her, stormed up to the registration desk, holding her wrist. She was wearing an expensive-looking beige pantsuit, her highlighted blonde hair perfectly styled, and sunglasses perched on top of her head despite it being nighttime. She immediately demanded to see a doctor, claiming she had fallen in her driveway and hurt her wrist, insisting it was probably broken. When I asked her to fill out the forms and explained about the trauma cases and the wait time, she became indignant. She started boasting about being on the hospital board's fundraising committee and demanded immediate attention. I was already rushing past her with blood bags for one of the crash victims when I simply told her to take a seat and assured her we'd get to her as soon as possible. She responded by threatening to sue the hospital. I didn't have time to argue. The teenage girl's blood pressure was dropping, and we needed all hands on deck. For the next hour, we worked tirelessly, stabilizing the crash victims. More ambulances kept arriving, bringing in more injured people from the pileup. Every few minutes, I could hear Karen's shrill voice complaining to anyone who would listen. She tried calling the hospital administrator at 10 p.m., threatened to call the local news, and even attempted to follow one of the doctors into the restricted area. After about 2 hours, when most of the crash victims were either stabilized or moved to surgery, I finally had a moment to check on her. Her wrist had a small bruise, barely visible. No swelling, no deformity, nothing that suggested a break or even a sprain. When I approached to examine her, she immediately launched into a tirade about how long she'd been waiting. She demanded everyone's names, threatening to have us all fired. I tried to maintain my professional demeanor as I examined her wrist. When I explained that it appeared to be just a minor bruise and offered to get her some ice, she became even more agitated. She called me stupid, insisted she was in excruciating pain, and demanded both an X-ray and the strongest pain medication we had. I calmly explained that given what I was seeing, an X-ray wasn't necessary, but offered her some over-the-counter pain reliever instead. That's when everything went sideways. In one swift motion, she reached into her handbag and pulled out what I later learned was a syringe she'd stolen from one of the supply carts during her unauthorized wanderings around the emergency room. Before I could react, she lunged forward and stabbed it into my arm. The needle went straight through my scrubs and into my flesh. I let out a scream that brought everyone running. 2 security guards who were nearby tackled her to the ground as she tried to run. She kept screaming about her rights and how we were all going to be sorry. The next few hours were a blur. The syringe was sent to the lab for testing, and I had to undergo blood tests and start preventive medications since we didn't know what had been in it or if it was contaminated. Thankfully, my co-workers took amazing care of me while the police arrested Karen. It turned out the syringe was empty. She had apparently grabbed it thinking it contained medication, but the intent to harm was there, and the security cameras had caught everything. The police found 3 more stolen syringes in her purse, along with various other medical supplies she'd pilfered. The district attorney charged her with assault with a deadly weapon, theft of medical supplies, and attempted drug theft. Her position on the fundraising committee didn't help her case. If anything, it made it worse because she had abused her connection to the hospital. During the trial, it came out that she had been banned from 2 other hospitals for trying to steal prescription pads and harassing staff. The judge wasn't amused by any of it. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison with an additional 3 years of probation after release. She was also permanently banned from all hospitals in the state except in cases of genuine medical emergencies, and even then, she would require a police escort. The hospital board issued a formal apology to me and implemented stricter security measures for medical supplies. They also started a new program to support healthcare workers who experience violence on the job. I still work in the emergency room. Sometimes, on particularly busy nights, when entitled patients start complaining about wait times, I roll up my sleeve and show them the small scar from the syringe. It tends to put things in perspective pretty quickly. About 10 years ago, I applied to work at a retail store selling various types of technology. This store is a rather large chain in the United Kingdom and can get especially busy after 5 p.m. or during holidays and sales. When I applied for the job, I hoped to be placed in the computing department because I was passionate about different types of computer builds and had experience building my own computer. However, I was temporarily placed in the white goods section, which sold appliances like fridges and washing machines for training purposes. This happened despite me admitting that I knew absolutely nothing about these items. But no, apparently, knowledge of household appliances should have been inherited through my genes because I'm a woman, so I must be good at it. I bit my tongue and waited, as I needed the money and had just graduated from university. A few months into the job, I realized I wasn't going to be transferred to the computing department no matter how much I wanted it. My sales were strong, but the managers wouldn't budge, seemingly afraid I might give incorrect advice. It was the start of a new school term, and the store was becoming extremely busy. A couple came in wanting to buy a computer for their teenage child to play games on. As a fellow gamer, I wanted to help them, but my manager rudely pulled me back and reminded me that unless we were assigned to a specific department, we were not allowed to assist customers or give advice. So he called over another colleague to help the parents. Since it was quiet in my department, I began tidying up around the store and overheard my colleague trying to sell the parents an Apple computer, assuring them it would be great for gaming and was commonly used by professionals. At the time, we earned a higher commission on Apple products. However, I knew these machines weren't ideal for gaming and would likely struggle to run heavier games or even be incompatible with the operating system. I'm not sure what else the colleague said, but the parents believed him and bought an Apple computer for their child. The manager was proud of this colleague and advised me to look at him as an example of good salesmanship. I told him I could have outperformed that sale and that the customer would probably return the item, but I was once again reminded not to interfere with the computing department. A few days later, during a busy day in the store, particularly in the computing section, due to back-to-school sales, several people were absent due to being overworked. This left only 2 people on the floor in the computing department, including the colleague who had sold the Apple computer. Sure enough, the parents returned with a computer, which often signals that something is wrong or they want a refund. They spotted the colleague who had helped them, but he quickly decided it was time to take a lunch break, leaving just one person in the department. The parents, visibly frustrated, went to the till, but after waiting in line, they were told to find another colleague from the tech department, as large item refunds couldn't be processed at the till. Eventually, they approached me since I didn't appear busy and asked for assistance. I would have gladly helped, but I remembered what my manager had said and had to inform them that I wasn't allowed to handle anything from the computing department due to store policy. The parents approached other colleagues and kept hearing the same response. Their frustration continued to grow, and other customers, eager to buy products, were also becoming annoyed because only employees assigned to the computing department could sell computer-related items. They tried to speak with the one colleague on the floor, but he was busy with other customers, while the original colleague who had sold them the computer had signed out for the day, and another was running late. Within about 20 minutes, there was a long line of angry customers by the tills, all demanding to speak with the manager. The overwhelmed employee at the till had no choice but to call both the store manager and the floor managers to deal with the situation. The managers tried to shift the blame onto us, the other store employees, but I reminded them of the manager's instructions forbidding us from handling anything in the tech department without training. Stating that we were simply following company policy only added to the customer's frustration, resulting in a commotion by the tills and further delays for other shoppers. I'm not sure how the entire situation was resolved, as an older customer requested my assistance shortly afterward. However, that day we received numerous complaints on different websites about the policy and how store staff refused to help because it was not their department. This led to several brainstorming sessions about reducing complaints, but none of the suggestions were implemented. You would think they'd have learned from this experience and changed the policy, but they didn't. Instead, they gave additional training to those already in the computing department and allowed some colleagues to sell smaller items like mice, keyboards, consoles, games, and printers, but not laptops, computers, or virtual reality devices. Unsurprisingly, this led to more complaints. The last time I visited the store to buy my mother a new laptop using a voucher, the situation hadn't changed. We ended up waiting around for 45 minutes for someone to process the sale. At least I got a chance to share my thoughts about the store policy with the manager. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.